Good afternoon, everybody. It's Jim, and it is, of course, Matthew. We are here on a day after a baseball game. You mentioned yesterday when we were about to finish that you hoped that it got over in about 2 hours and 45 minutes. Didn't quite go that. We didn't quite get that, but we got a much shorter and much more compact game as the Blue Jays and Vladdy just said to the Dodgers, "Okay, we understand that you won last night, but you know what? We're still here."
hmm Yeah, the momentum is only as good as your next starting pitcher. Kind of
Right.
reared its head yesterday. Also, I said who can get to the bullpen faster, and that was true. But it was also whose bullpen crumbled quicker.
Mm-hmm.
That also mattered as well. Blue Jays out hit them. Like
Yeah.
I sit here and I've said it for 2 series in a row now that the Blue Jays are facing an uphill battle in the pitching matchup, and I'm going to say
Mm-hmm.
it when it comes to the game again tonight because they are again on the bad side of the pitching matchup.
Mm-hmm.
But it just doesn't matter with this Blue Jays team. Like you can roll out whoever you want to roll out, and the odds are they're probably going to hit them. They hit Blake
Yeah.
Snell earlier. The only pitcher they really haven't hit has been Yamamoto.
Right. And
Um,
nobody's at Yamamoto. So
yeah, and that's still like it's a showing of what they've done throughout the playoffs, and it's
right.
showing of what he's done throughout the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Both very indicative, like showing like, hey, this is Yamamoto is much more of the immovable force versus unstoppable object
Right.
kind of matchup than Blake Snell was last time. But
Right.
Snell goes again tonight against Savage, same matchup from game one.
Right.
See if the Blue Jays are able to get to him the same way they were able to in Toronto.
Yeah, and being the veteran pitcher that he is, I'm sure that he's gone over and over and over what he's going to do and how it's going to work. So, you know, I don't. And Blake Snell, if you're Dave Roberts, you got to figure out. I think honestly, I was a little surprised that he sent, Otani back out there after Otani had gone five.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they let him work into the seventh inning. To be honest with you,
Yeah,
after you get through six and you were down 2-1 through six, and you're like,
yeah,
all right, like that's got to be your point where you're going, hey, like this is as good we could have asked for. Like 6 innings,
yeah. And
only
only
two
two
runs.
runs, only 2 runs given up.
Yeah,
And
like this is his best.
yeah, and the guy did play for 6.5 hours the night before.
Well, that's where I think my question to is you go out there for the seventh inning, first two guys get on, you got second and third, nobody out,
Right.
and obviously Dave Roberts pulled the trigger after that second and third, but it does cross my mind to be like, hey, like obviously this is Shohei Ohtani. If you're gonna trust a guy on the roster, you're gonna trust him to go out there and
Hmm.
like he's gonna tell you when he's good and when he's not.
Right.
But at a certain point, you also got to understand that this guy played as much as he played the day before.
Right.
Now you're asking him to go out there and try and give you a seventh inning when he's hasn't really been a length guy
Right.
really this entire year either.
Yeah.
It felt like a tall ask, and it was an ask that ended up biting them in that seventh inning.
Yeah, because a lot of these pitchers, you know, they're not. They don't like coming in with traffic on the bases,
Mm-mm.
and I'm not saying that would have turned the tide away from the Blue Jays, but you take and book six for Otani and go, okay, you've given us more than I thought you could. We're only a 1 run down. All right, so let me go to out there and start moving our pitchers around.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little surprised that Dave pulled the trigger that quick.
Yeah. I mean, which second and third, nobody out, seventh inning. That's probably I feel like that's relatively normal for the World Series, I would guess. I mean, Bieber got the hook real fast
Right.
um, in the top of that half inning, I believe, or maybe even a half inning earlier.
Yeah, it was a half inning earlier. But
So
yeah,
when Bieber, yeah, when they sensed trouble with Bieber, they got him out of there. I don't think they really did it as quickly with Shohei, which again, he's earned the longer leash, but you'd think given the usage the day before, you would have had some kind of like hey, this guy I know he's only giving up 2, but this is kind of where you need to call it here, given usage and everything.
Well, his longest outing in the last month has been 6 innings. So you're going to take after a game that went 6.5 innings, which he was on base 9 times. That he gives you 6 innings, and you're going to ask him to go 1 more inning. I mean, it made no sense to me. But again, that's not taking anything away from the Jays. They possibly and probably would have gotten to anybody else that they put in there. But
that is the thing, is the reliever they brought in that ended up giving up those runs on second and third. It wasn't like he gave up like a shot initially.
No.
Granted, they strung some stuff together on him and got to him, but the hit that he gave up as soon as Ohtani came out was Andres Jimenez just put the barrel of the bat on the baseball. Like he put the bat out there, and it was very much a protect kind of an at bat and swing from him, and he fought it off into left center and it scores. So it wasn't like the guy they brought in came in and like had this massive blow up. They put good at bats together last night.
Yeah. They proved why they're still there.
Yep.
By the way, a lot of people forget, and that's what we're here for, that while the Dodgers have the number 1, payroll in baseball, the Blue Jays are number 2.
I think they're number 5.
Okay, let me look. Let's see. I was talking about left in the series, but that's okay. Let's see, what do we got? Anyway, as we go to our research department here, it was, it was amazing. It was a fun game to watch. It was a different game to watch. But a game that I think that now we know this is a pivotal game 5.
Yeah, when you come down to pivot games, generally it's game 5 or it's game 7. Like those are your 2 biggest games in a series, depending on one, the format, and 2, just in terms of impact on the rest of the series. Game 7 would obviously be it's the last game, but game 5 that generally gives you a pretty good momentum shift. If the Blue Jays win game 5, I think the series is over.
We'll see. I don't know. I think it's all right. You're right. The Blue Jays are 5. The Phillies are 4. The Yankees are 3. The Mets are 2. Dodgers are 1. And
I think I'm looking at the graphic right now. I think the funniest thing is in the top 5, there's only one team that didn't win 90 games.
Right.
And that's the Mets.
And that's the Mets. The good old Mets. There's the series that the Subway series that never happened. So there you go. Juan Soto sitting back watching on TV. But we'll see. We'll work on something later. I'm working on a piece about how many teams do deferred payments and which ones get the most out of the value out of it. And right now the Dodgers it isn't even close to number 2. The Dodgers have a lot of deferred money, which allows them freedom to do a lot of this. A lot of the players, when they sign these contracts, they don't like to do deferred money. So one other quick baseball note before we get down the road here. The Phillies, Dombrowski, the general manager, came out the other day and said that he just wasn't sure that Bryce Harper was playing up to his standard as a quote-unquote superstar. That's not something you usually say um, when you're on a radio show talking about, what's going to happen in 2026.
Yeah, Dave Dombrowski's comments as a whole, really, when he did his big press conference, I thought were interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about the different guys they'd like to bring back. Based on his conversation, a guy like Ranger Suarez didn't really come up. I don't think he's necessarily a guy that factors into their long-term plan.
Right.
The way he spoke about Bryce Harper, and based on what things have been going, it sounds like Bryce Harper's name is coming up in trade discussions, which wouldn't surprise me. This is talked about the way the Phillies lineup is constructed, and like the roster as a whole it's kind of built on they're towards the back end of their competition window in terms of the age of some of their offensive stars, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Trey Turner's thing was contact and speed really throughout the majority of his career. He's on the other side of 30 now, and he doesn't get younger year by year. And so, you start to wonder if some of his effectiveness may wear off. And Bryce Harper, obviously, he's battled injuries year over year, and he commands a large number. And if they don't feel like they're getting the just production out of the number they're paying him, and really the games they're getting out of him, then I think that the trade rumors could very well be true. I think if presented with the right package, Philadelphia and Dave Dombrowski might be willing to move off of that contract if it means that they can do more in the offseason in terms of big money spending on their free agents to bolster that roster.
Well, they got to keep Schwarber.
That's where it starts.
Right. But I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. When they signed Bryce Harper to the deal, they asked Bryce Harper to be the face of the franchise. Bryce Harper is wearing Philly Fanatic socks. He is out doing everything in the community that they've ever asked the man to do. So, if Dave Dombrowski, who frankly I have absolutely, zero respect for as a baseball manager, general manager, I don't think he's in any way, shape, or form in the top 15 in that position. Decides he's going to air his dirty laundry on WIP in an interview. I'm pissed if I'm a player. I don't care if he said something nice about me. That's you want to get rid of Bryce, or you want to deal with that. Fine, that's something you sit down with Bryce and you talk about it and you say, okay, here's what we got to do. But you do not hang people out to dry like that. In my estimation, I mean, how are you going to go back and put the toothpaste in the tube when you have literally said the guy who you asked to be the face of the franchise, who's done everything you wanted to, and granted, he's been injured. There's no question about that. And he has not produced, Bryce Harper numbers. Again, no argument on that. But you ask him to do stuff. He's done everything you ask him to do, and now you've got buyer's remorse. Yeah. Nobody held a gun to his head to say sign that contract.
Yeah, I guess the only way that I would describe Dave Dombrowski's thinking, which is the way that he's always done it, even going back to I was fairly familiar with the way things worked during his time at Boston.
Right.
All things considered, there was very much a way that Dave Dombrowski was going about his business. He has a way that he runs his baseball teams.
Right.
But this is kind of a scenario, and I know people weren't happy when it happened and pointed to the Red Sox being cheap and such, but this is kind of where Dave Dombrowski got in Boston. This is where his roster headed. It was really expensive and it was really old. Just to be quite frank. So that was a reason that the Boston ownership decided to move in a different direction, because they don't like investing in aging superstars necessarily, giving them those bigger contracts like they gave to Bryce Harper. It's a situation that he's in now, a situation he has to navigate. But I think what may be making, because you talk about the face of the franchise, what may be making him make this decision, I think Dave Dombrowski would rather keep Schwarber than he would Harper. I think
He
in
might.
terms of the
Yeah.
production, like he's kind of doing everything that they wanted Bryce Harper to be in terms of like the fans love him and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I think Dave Dombrowski looks at Bryce Harper as a guy who's been hurt for a couple of years, and while he was the face of the franchise while he's healthy, and honestly still probably is, I don't think he sees the same face of the franchise value in Bryce Harper, considering he hasn't been on the field and the fans have kind of endured themselves to Kyle Schwarber over that time.
I like Kyle. I do. He was in Washington. He did everything they asked him to do and more. I don't think anybody, to be honest, I don't think anybody expected to do, Kyle Schwarber wasn't a big name, player when he got to Washington. A lot of people in Washington were like, who is this guy? Well, after 1 year there, they found out what the guy was. He's a quality player and a good guy to have around the clubhouse.
Yep.
If you look at the two of them, Bryce and Kyle, they're pretty much the same guy in regards to personalities and buy-in and giving their time to the franchise. I mean, there's no two guys on that team who probably, are more Philadelphia, they're relatable to Philadelphians than those two guys. They're two blue-collar, hardworking guys who, they're not looking for the limelight. They're not hanging out in bars at night. They are just come to the ballpark, do their job, and go home. And it's very much a blue-collar mentality for the Philly fans. And I think that's why the fans like, Kyle. He's the tough guy not to like.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and I'm going back to trying to figure out the reasoning as to why Bryce Harper would be on the move. And to be honest with you, I think Dave Dombrowski understands where his market could be. And again, this is like, I guess, playing defense in a way for Dave Dombrowski. But the thought of there are two teams in the NL East that are desperately vying to not only keep up with each other, but currently keep up. I said AL East. They're desperately trying to keep up with not only each other, but the team that's currently in the World Series, and that's the Red Sox and the Yankees. They both have a glaring hole at first base come this next offseason. And, relatively speaking, pretty good top-end prospects in both of those systems. So it's an enticing prospect to think about putting that name to go along with those big brands that need that position. It may be an attempt to capitalize on a market. Not saying it's a right or a wrong thing, but I
get the philosophy. I do. And, nobody other than Shohei Ohtani and Vlad Guerrero are irreplaceable for their teams. And could I see Bryce in somebody else's uniform? I could. My only point was, I didn't like the way he handled it.
Yeah, no, but
if you want to do that, which is fine, they pay him to be the general manager. If they want him to do it, or he wants to do it, I don't think he has to float Bryce's name out in the ether on WIP. I think he can, he's got everybody's phone number. And trust me, I'm sure there are a lot of teams who've already made phone calls to it. Now the problem is Bryce has got a no trade contract. So whatever team you're going to trade him to, he's got to buy into it. And number two, they're going to either Philly's going to eat a lot of contract, or you're going to have to bring on somebody who's going to be willing to take that contract. There's a lot of money still left on that contract.
Yeah. Part of it, I think, if I remember correctly, towards the end of Dombrowski's time at Boston, when he got a little louder, especially around that 2019 season, he got louder, and the team wasn't necessarily in a great place in 2019. And the same is true here in Philadelphia. Like they have a legitimate problem on their hands because they were manhandled in the NLDS. They
Right,
were
sure.
like the Dodgers took them out and discarded of them like they were the trash coming on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
It was really easy for them, and this was their team that was all in. Like this was an all in team for Philly. They said they understood kind of where they were at, and this needed to be a really good year for them, and
Mm-hmm.
it just wasn't. Like not showing really any fight in that NLDS, I think is big, just because of the way. Like again, I've gone back the way the team is built. It's not built as some long-term model, with some good veteran presence and some young
Right.
guys that are going to come on
Mm-hmm.
kind of when those guys start to fade. It's not it's an aging roster through and through.
They did that before. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the second time they've screwed it up this way. They
And I
didn't
just don't
they didn't set up for it.
yeah, I just don't know how they're going to maintain the level that they're at without some kind of a I feel like they need to have a reset period. And when I say reset period, I'm talking like 2 years. Like they're
Sure.
going to be willing to spend money again. That's not going to be an issue. But they need some point of reset because I think they're probably honestly better off going into this season if they don't think that they can win a title under the constraints because Dombrowski talked about it in one of his press conferences. He said he already knows the budget.
Right.
And so if he doesn't think that they can build a roster that's going to compete with the Dodgers or anybody for a World Series for that matter, then just go ahead and tear it down. Get what you can get before that lockout comes next offseason. If you stink this year, fine. If you stink next year, no one's going to care because there's a real chance baseball's not played anyways.
Right.
So, I would say just get out ahead of it if you feel like the ship is already sinking. Don't go
Sure.
down with it.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. And look, if I know that Bryce, there's probably three teams on the West Coast that Bryce would play for because he's a Las Vegas kid.
Mm-hmm.
The Giants desperately wanted him. That money was more, they had more. They were offering more money than the Phillies were. Bryce was concerned about he wanted to be with a contender, and then he was concerned about the roster on that. The Dodgers had a deal. They didn't want a long term deal. They had a 5 year deal that
Mm-hmm.
would have paid him, more money per year over 5 years than he would have gotten, anywhere else for that shorter deal. And so they said, okay, that didn't work for him, and so Bryce ended up in Philadelphia. For 13 years, was $329 or $330 million, which
Mm-hmm.
right now seems like a chump change given
Deal.
the contracts have been thrown out. I don't think. I don't know. I mean, I think Pete Alonso wants to be back with the Mets, but if I don't know if I don't think he would go to the Mets. I don't think they'd trade him to the Mets.
No, I don't think they would trade him to the Mets unless they just think that lowly of him now for some reason somehow. But it's an interesting. It's going to be an interesting first base market because
Mhm.
if he is available, what does Pete Alonso do? Because you said that you think Pete Alonso wants to go back to the Mets. I can all but assure that Pete Alonso wants to go back to the Mets, but I don't think the Mets want Pete Alonso back.
That's the problem.
That's where your issue is going to lie. So if Pete Alonso wants to be someplace but can't be someplace, where does he land? And
Mhm.
that takes a suitor away from your Bryce Harper trade too, because the odds are that if Pete Alonso's not going to land in New York, he's going to land somewhere else. It's going to pay him a lot of money, and generally the teams that are willing to pay a lot of money are your bigger market teams. So
Mhm. I
it
could
would,
see I could see him playing in Chicago.
mm-hmm.
I could see him playing in San Diego. Um, I could even see him playing with the new ownership group in Tampa, where he's from.
Yeah,
Um, they could make him. They could make him their star. I mean, they weren't that far off of playoff situations this year.
Now in Tampa, that would bring up the question: what do they do with Yandy Diaz?
Mm-hmm. Well, he can
Because
play other positions, so.
yeah,
So I mean, it's believe me, I don't think the Rays are like number 2 or 3 on his list. But I'm just
yeah,
saying, if the ownership group wanted to make a splash and to prove to the fans that they're willing to spend some money, bringing home a local boy wouldn't be a bad idea.
yeah, absolutely. Guy who played at the University of Florida as well.
Right? Yeah. So there's that. So anyway, so that's our baseball for today. Um, Nick Saban to LSU, says Paul Feinbaum, who says that might be the only job he would take. What say you, sir, on that one?
I don't hate it. I do understand that I it was floated out there, and this was a fan base in college football kind of representing the way
Mm-hmm.
everybody believes they are now in college football, that anybody can do anything really.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody feels like a superhero come off season time. But I heard a Michigan State guy who's like, what if we brought Nick Saban back and we had so and so was like we bring him in on a 2-year deal and agree that after 2 years, we'll pay you whatever, but this guy's going to be the next head coach after you. We just need you to come lay some foundation for this guy, make sure that he is the right guy, yada, yada, which I think is a scenario that could happen at LSU. Like it's not an out of the realm thought. I really doubt Nick Saban's going to come back out of coaching. Really doubt. And Paul Feinbaum loves him a good clip. So that would fit right into that. But I would say Saban's a long shot, but if there is anybody that can get him out of retirement, I would say it's probably LSU.
No, yeah, I would agree, but he's going to be 74,
Oh yeah,
and
no,
and I think that obviously that would not be your long term solution. Um, he seems to be enjoying his time at ESPN, and like everyone, I mean, you want to be wanted, right? I think
yep,
Saban would go and do an interview. I don't think he'd ever take the job.
yeah. I'm kind of in a similar. I could see him even doing some like assisting on the coaching search if that's
Mm-hmm.
what they want. Like because there's so many of these coaching processes that are screwed up, like that just aren't well-oiled machines,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how you wind up with these bad hires. I still am convinced that Florida is on the wrong path in terms of looking for their head coach and setting themselves up for disappointment and failure by one the upper the upper levels, the athletic director, everybody involved is searching for this big hire, and it's in the middle of something I'm writing. The big hire isn't always the big answer,
Mm-hmm.
and they cut out a lot of the coach pool. I would implore that LSU not do that. They went for the big hire last time and it burned them. You think of a guy
Mm-hmm.
in Ed Orgeron who just kind of fell into LSU's lap.
Right.
To be honest, he won a national title there. So just because they're big, they're a big sexy name doesn't mean they're gonna produce the same sexy results that their name was supposed to bring with them.
It's funny. Yesterday, Steve Spurrier did an interview, and they talked to him, um, and Steve has never been one to hide his feelings on anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he said, that one there's only one coach in the Southeastern Conference that he thinks is the best coach far and away. And he said it was Kirby Smart.
Mm-hmm.
And he said because Kirby understands how to recruit, he's got he understands how to build rosters. He understands how to work the portal, which he says he doesn't have to do much because of being Georgia. Um, and he knows that this guy is a guy who players like to play for. And
Mm-hmm.
they said, because they asked, is he a lot like you? He said, well, he goes, somehow, and this is kind of a funny situation, that Kirby, before he was, a name out there, he spent a lot of time with Steve, and they talked about all kinds of different philosophies and all that. So there's a bond there that you wouldn't think the head coach of Florida, the former head coach of Florida, and the present head coach of Georgia would have. But it's there, and they have great mutual respect for each other. As a matter of fact, even to the point where Kirby had mentioned that Spurrier was one of his big mentors during the time. And so Steve said, look, he goes, as far as coaches go, he says, you want a coach that players want to play for. And he said, and sometimes when these universities go out looking for people, that's not even on the list. They're looking at what they did at the university, how the wins and losses. Because nobody goes and talks to the players. Nobody wants to know, whether or not does this guy, do I like playing for him? He said, he said all of his, he goes, he got a lot of criticism, which he did, because he had a very loose situation. I mean, Steve was not the guy who's going to sleep, on the couch in his office, and spend 24 hours a day running the Florida football team. That was not ever going to be Steve Spurrier. I don't know. A lot of people don't realize this. Steve Spurrier never had an offensive playbook.
Really?
Yeah, never. Steve would, whenever he would go out and recruit, he would bring in players, and then they would sit down, and then he'd write plays up for them. That his playbook was week to week.
Wow. I mean, it feels like the correct way to do things. Your offense and your defense should cater to your opponent, and not only what you do well, but what they don't do well.
There were times, this is God's honest truth. Steve Spurrier, there were times during a game where Steve would take one of those whiteboards, right? And a Sharpie and literally create a play off of what he saw in the defense.
Yeah.
There were times that Shane Matthews, when Shane was playing there, would come off and he would say, Shane, what did you see? What's going on? And Shane would say, well, this is what they're running at us. And between the two of them, they'd sit down and they would create plays themselves. He would do it with Werfel. I mean, he literally sat down on the sidelines, even after, as I said, they write up a game plan for that game. And he said, once the game was over, it was burned. It was famous that he left his first, the quote unquote scripted sheet for the first 15 plays. He left it in the locker room. And it went to somebody else. And, the first 2 or 3 plays, he figured out, wait a minute, they know exactly what we're doing. And then he realized, well, wait a minute, he was looking for a sheet, and it's like it wasn't there. It's like, oh, I must have, I've lost it. So somebody got a hold of it. So he's like, okay, fine, let's just figure it out. So yeah, I mean, is that unorthodox coaching style? Yeah, it is an unorthodox coaching style, but it worked for him. But his point being that, just because a coach has a good name and the record is what the record is, it's not necessarily something you want to bring in. And he's not, and he wasn't throwing shade at Lane Kiffin, but his point was, you don't have to go and get the big name if you can find somebody who fits the program best.
Yeah, and like that's what you're asking these people, these big head coaches,
Mm-hmm.
typically what it is the result of their culture, or the result of their success is their culture
Mm-hmm.
that they've built at a said program. I've said it. You cannot just pick up a culture and bring it with you.
Mm-mm.
It's impossible. You can try and replicate it as much as you want, but it's not possible. If it was possible, then every assistant under Nick Saban ever would have picked up Nick Saban's system and would have
Mm-hmm.
picked up Nick Saban's culture, and they would have brought it with them. But they
Mm-hmm.
can't. They couldn't replicate what Nick Saban was able to replicate at Alabama. It's part of the reason that I think guys like Urban Meyer and Nick Saban are so incredible in what they were able to do,
Mm-hmm.
because they won at multiple spots. Like, they were able to take their success and bring
Mm-hmm.
it with them. It was a result of who they were and how they built their system, and their system was able to translate. Not everybody's system and culture is able to translate from place to place. It's just not possible. Kenny Dillingham couldn't have built what he built at Arizona State anywhere else, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a culture that is unique to him and what he's done. And like, you look at some of the places they're having a lot of success right now, and you talked about guys that want to play for their coaches.
Mm-hmm.
I think about Notre Dame when Brian Kelly left. Man, Marcus Freeman was the interim head coach, and they hired him. And you go back and you watch that video from when they hired him,
Mm-hmm.
and like the thing that you think when you see that video is like, it maybe now they aren't in a better spot, but man, they sure seem to really like that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's coming for Notre Dame, but they really like that guy. Same can be said for Ryan Day at Ohio State. Urban
Mm-hmm.
Meyer was stepping down. You go back and you watch that locker room when he got the whistle. Urban Meyer gave him the whistle after that Rose Bowl, and I think it was 21.
Right.
And you look at it and you go, I can't say that I feel much better about Ohio State as a program now, but one thing I can tell you is it looked like those guys sure liked who they picked. So it's such an important factor, and sometimes the correct response, the correct hire, isn't the one that looks the best. I don't know many people that typically get like super over the top excited when they hire coordinators,
Mm-hmm.
because coordinators typically aren't a sexy hire. But dang near every successful coach in the country right now was a coordinator at some point. Lane was at Bama as the OC. Kirby was at Bama as the DC. Ryan Day was the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Marcus Freeman was the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. Dan Lanning was the defensive coordinator at Georgia. Like,
Mm-hmm.
these really top-of-the-line programs are oftentimes built off these guys who learned it through a system, and they learned a culture, and they took what they learned and they went and they created their own culture at some place special. And they had guys that wanted to play for them. And
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to find in a coaching search, because there's not a statistic or
Mm-mm.
anything like that you can stick on any of these guys that's going to be able to quantify how their culture and how they build a team and how these guys buy in, how they relate to each one of these coaches. You just can't do it. It's part of the reason why coaching hires are so hard and why so many of the big ones don't work out the way you want them to.
There's another part to this which I think is important, and you and I've had this discussion before, and that is there are a lot of universities where, let's go over to Clemson, right, for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
The assistants at Clemson made Dabo Swinney a national champion.
Yep.
And that's, coaches in programs as big as those, a Nick Saban was a CEO. He would have to go out and basically, when he had the amazing coordinators he had, like Kirby Smart and guys like that, they went out and people wanted to play for Kirby Smart. Yeah, they wanted to play at Alabama. Sure, Saban was the head coach, but it was Kirby Smart that sold the defensive guys on wanting to play defense at Alabama. It was Lane Kiffin that sold the offensive guys on why to come to Alabama. It's and that is where you look at it and you go, okay, what was the deal with Saban and Meyer? Why were they successful? Why are they successful and were successful at different places? It's because they were smart enough to have assistant coaches that they hired that knew what they were doing.
Yep.
And I
Absolutely.
think that was very much the key to a lot of victories that they had that they wouldn't have gotten if they had not been involved at there we go, sorry, alarms went off. But that whole culture is based on assistant coaches.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And like I don't think that necessarily changed. Like when you
No.
that people have around them now and where they are in terms of their success, like Kirby Smart nailed his coordinator hires. Ryan Day has nailed his coordinator hires,
Mm-hmm.
especially on the defensive side these last couple of years, because that's been the better side of the football for the last 2 years for Ohio State. Um, he did a really good job. Dan Lanning nailed his coordinator hires. Obviously, one of them was Kenny Dillingham when he first got
Mm-hmm.
there. So all of these guys, they've nailed their coordinator hires because I mean Dan Lanning was the DC at Georgia. Todd Monken was the OC at Georgia. All these guys,
Mm-hmm.
they rely on these guys. They are the heads of their department, and you are the
Mm-hmm.
head of everything. And so these guys that call plays like Steve Sarkisian and Billy Napier, I think are guys that have a tougher time in the current landscape of college football. It's just harder to call plays and be the CEO of a team because you have to do both right now. So I think the coordinator role is a really good one to go after. That's part of the reason that I really like a Joe Brady to come back to LSU. It it's it's in these places you have to find these people that fit your culture because there are cultures that are exclusive to universities. LSU's culture is exclusive to LSU.
Mm-hmm.
What they have in Baton Rouge is exclusive to that area and that location. Now go find somebody that fits it. Brian Kelly didn't fit it. He was never going to fit it. He could throw on whatever. He could have found a Cajun accent where he found a Southern one. It wouldn't have mattered. He wasn't going to fit at LSU just the way he went about his business. So, where who are the right people to understand culture and understand fit? Those are the people you need to have in those decision making rooms. And I get it. Boosters pour a lot of money into that program, and they deserve a return on their investment, or at least they believe they do. They don't need to be making these decisions.
Yeah.
I know
See,
they're heavily involved.
yeah.
They don't need to be making these decisions.
Now the other thing too, when we talk about Lane Kiffin and you know, and Lane Kiffin, there's two things about Alex Golesh and Lane Kiffin, and we'll kind of the why it's going to be hard to pry them away from where they are for the time being. When Kiffin got to Mississippi, he was given carte blanche. The AD stepped back and said, "What do you need? Tell us what you want. We will get it for you."
Mm-hmm.
There's a 50-person department in the football area at Ole Miss that literally every one of those 50 people have been either hired or okayed and vetted by Lane Kiffin. Wherever he's going to go next, are they going to give him the latitude to put together? And we're talking about everybody from nutritionist to weight coach to, to the people, physical therapy type people, everybody who are involved with, even the academic people who are involved with, traveling with the team. They were all signed off on by Lane. When Golesh got to USF, Michael Kelly said, "What do you need?" He says, "I need a group of people." He got 43 guys.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't transfer 50 people from Ole Miss to LSU. It just doesn't work, or to Florida.
Yeah.
And are they going to give them the opportunity to do that? So maybe I can't take my 50 people with me, but can I replicate that? I don't know. They start looking at the head coach, but they don't look at, what goes under the head coach that makes them successful.
Mm-hmm.
Other than, we just talked about coordinators. Yeah, that's fine. Coordinators are great. But
Yeah.
there's other coaches and a whole a lot of things that go into winning, and it's not just the head coach.
Yeah, and this I'll add this on there because I think it's part of the reason why people were so confused about the way things have gone in Florida over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
Is I do think that Florida kind of nailed some of the culture part when they hired Billy Napier. Like, you listen to people talk, what was going on in the facility and like on the sideline, that wasn't the issue. It was the play calling.
Mm-hmm.
That was their main gripe, the play calling, because everything seemed like it should work there. So for all the importance that culture and recruiting have, you've got to have all three phases as a head coach.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're going to fail at these locations where the lights are the brightest. And if you have a weak spot in your coaching triangle, because the way I see it, you've got culture, recruiting, and play calling. Those are probably the three big factors on the triangle if you're trying to hire a head coach. And just because they nailed two out of them, that third one was glaring in the SEC. That third one's glaring when you're at Florida, and it always will be. So they have to make sure that whoever they hire can nail all three aspects. And I say all that to also add on, in the day and age of NIL, I would say it's probably easier to transfer your culture than it has been ever before as well.
Right. Well, it's going to be. It's not going to be as easy as some people think, and we're doing our best to educate folks to how these things work. And tomorrow we got our Thursday night football. We'll probably talk a little bit about Jimmy Sexton. He's a guy who you don't know much about. Many of you do. Many of you don't. Who represents 11 of the head football coaches just in the SEC alone. And many times, ironically, it's Jimmy Sexton who, when they fire one coach, comes back and brings you another one. So we'll see how that situation is either helping or hurting some of these programs out there, and especially the buyout deals that Jimmy has been able to negotiate.
He knows how to get his guys paid.
Oh man, yeah, he is the Scott Boras of college football coaching and pro coaching. Yeah, he's got a pretty good roster, and we'll talk about that roster sometime tomorrow. But all right, quick out the doors we go. Prediction: Game 5, important game tonight. A rematch of Game 1 of the series, which Toronto, won.
Yeah, I think I'm going to pick the Dodgers tonight, just because I for forever and evermore. I know they've made it to the World Series now, but pitching matters, and I've said it a trillion times. I'm going to keep saying it. The Blue Jays don't have the advantage in this pitching matchup. And when you see a good pitcher twice, I think generally it's harder for the lineup, especially if they got to him the first time. Like, he's going to come make changes, and he's going to make changes. So, and with the stuff that Blake Snell can throw at you, that should be a recipe for success for the Dodgers tonight.
It's funny, he's a 2-time Cy Young Award winner, and he goes to Clayton Kershaw for advice. So
yeah,
another 2-time Cy Young Award winner. So it's it's one of those situations where you go, if you got somebody you can talk to, that's not a bad guy to go talk to. So
it is not.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, look, good luck to everybody. Hope you have a wonderful evening, everyone. Matthew, thank you as always, my friend, for bringing the information and the knowledge. And we'll catch you up with you tomorrow. An interesting Thursday night football game. Baltimore and Miami. At last week or 2 weeks ago, that might be something you would say, maybe I'll watch Netflix instead. But it might have some interesting twists and turns to it. So we'll see what's going on. And I understand, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow, that Mark Andrews might be on the block for a trade from the Ravens, which might be an interesting circumstance if that comes to fruition. We'll find out very soon. Anyway, thank you all for joining us this afternoon and all the fun questions and things you asked. We will be back tomorrow. Thanks, Matthew, and y'all have a nice day.